If we're going to spend this much money buying an asset that represents growth in the future, we need to understand it better and not kill it with our embrace as soon as we buy it. You can change people around the edges, but fundamentally they are who they are. So I think you can't prenup your way out of a relationship. There has to be true love, right? And you shouldn't be waiting to when you see the relationship therapist to say, how do I fix this? This is too late.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Insight in 15, the flagship podcast from KPMG that takes a closer look at the big issues facing business leaders today. I'm Stuart Burt, and on today's episode we're focused on the UK deals market, where increasingly large corporates and smaller startups are coming together in a case of opposites attract. Now today I'm delighted to be joined by Chau Woeste, a partner here who leads our people in M&A practice at KPMG. Welcome, Chau, to the podcast.
Thank you very much, Stuart.
Now, we'll get on to the more human element of deal making in a moment. But first, I just want to get your reflections on the deal market. What sort of activity are you seeing today?
Well, the deals market's still going. I think it's where we're at is that the economy has had a lot of different shocks. So this is about, in the market, most organizations are looking for avenues to grow. And that's why we have the opposites attract, which is how can I find a unique asset that can help me grow, whether that is a consumer business looking to grow into a niche market, or if you are a large life sciences, how do you secure the pipeline of drugs? So going into biotechs, or if you are fintech buying, big banks buying fintechs, or if you are TMT, so tech, media, actually buying into software. So opposites attract is really about when you are big corporates looking for avenues for growth. And we see increasingly those types of more niche deals where big corporates are looking to grow.
And we'll come on to the specifics of what makes a successful opposites attract deal. But who's the driving force here? Is it the large corporate who's looking for greater agility? Or is it the smaller startup who's maybe struggling to scale up a bit more? Or is it a bit of both?
I'd definitely say it's a bit of both. I think it's if you're if you're a scale up at some stage, let's say you're a biotech, there's going to be a ceiling to which you can't take that drug to market. So actually at some stage, there is a stage in the evolution of the organization where you are going to look for the best partner to take that to market or to take to the next stage of evolution. So I think definitely, startup and scale up nowadays have got a lot more infrastructure behind it. And we were just working with one last week. He's now, sold his business to a large corporate, and he now coaches other founders in terms of their journey, in terms of taking to market.
From your experience in M&A, what are the biggest M&A pitfalls that kind of early signs that show it might not be the right match?
So, these deals are quite hard to pull off, and they're quite hard to pull off because large organizations are pretty set in their ways. So I'll give you an example. So this is with a large consumer business, and their head of corp dev said, actually, if I reflect on the last 20 deals we've done, where we bought big buying smalls or small brands, we've probably only succeeded in 2 out of 20, which is quite a stark, statistic, as in, usually you'd say, yes, majority of deals, struggle or fail to deliver value. And often it comes down to people and culture. But when you have opposites attract, that is amplified massively.
Now, I want to pick up on the people and the culture side of things. Sometimes you get examples where there's been perhaps an entrepreneur that's grown a business and then it's been taken over by a large corporate. And there's a bit of a clash. To what extent is that a personality clash, a culture clash? Where does that go wrong?
So I had a large FS client that said, actually, we're buying you because we want to grow in that area, and we're going to leave you alone. We're going to give you the power fully to make that growth happen. And the earn-out plan was substantial. But of course, as soon as the business was acquired, then the buyer wanted to integrate them. And of course, the founder said, well, no, because, I've got to have my earn-out plan. But of course, it then also boils down to, as you say, personality and trust, which is if you did have that relationship of trust, you could probably persuade
Mm.
the person to compromise. But if you start from a foundation of distrust because they promised to leave him alone, and then he saw that as a breach of trust, he fought even harder.
And I guess in terms of due diligence, a lot of focus is rightly on financial due diligence, legal due diligence. Is there such a thing as cultural due diligence?
For sure, there is, and I think especially with technology and AI nowadays, it actually allows us to process that amount of data to get a proxy read on culture. An example of that, when we worked with a Silicon Valley giant, they were buying this asset. It was over $20 billion, so a massive deal. A scale up business. The scale up business was doing a software that would eventually could displace the buyer. So actually, really, really important deal. And we did a really large due diligence, like full financial, etc., on it. And interestingly, the most interesting part of our readout to the M&A team was the page that showed the cultural differences between the two. And we used AI outside in to actually map the data, mapping sentiment data as a proxy for how the buyer and the target compared and then versus other competitors. And the target scored higher culturally, positively on everything except pay. As in, they were opposite ends of the spectrum all the way through. And the M&A team really took note of this and said, actually, we presented it to them on a Monday, and they said, our chief people officer really needs to see this. So, and I presented it to her on a Tuesday, and she said, my exco needs to see this. And we presented it to them on a Wednesday. And on a Thursday, they actually changed their integration strategy. Because if we're going to spend this much money buying an asset that represents growth in the future, we need to understand it better and not kill it with our embrace as soon as we buy it.
Yes.
But it's a little bit like a marriage, which is you could prenup and say you may not weigh any more than X number of pounds or kilos or stones, right?
Yeah.
But it doesn't work like that. Is there actually, true love in the relationship? Do you want to be in it? Is there trust?
And the other side of the relationship is the smaller startup, the smaller partner. What do they need to be thinking about and know about their buyers in advance?
We actually held a session last week with our 25 our global biggest M&A clients, and we had the founders come in, and the advice they gave, both of the founders who was in the room, were it's really, really important that the business owner and sponsor on the buyer side and the founder are aligned, as in they have a true passion for what they want to achieve coming together. And to give you an example, the biotech here had developed a technology around diagnostics for oncology, so for cancer treatment. So they developed something incredible. And when you ask him, why did you sell to this particular buyer, he would say, well, I spoke to all the other ones, so I worked with all of them, and there was only one I could have gone for, and that was because the head of R&D in this buyer and I are completely aligned, and I trust him. So it wasn't about the money.
And so I guess we've talked a bit about the pitfalls and the preparations ahead of a deal. What are the things that can be put into place very early on that maximize the chances of success of a deal?
I worked with a large consumer business that was buying up founder-led businesses in Europe. And they'd done quite a few deals where it went quite badly. But on this one in Italy, they were determined to actually address it. So we came in to support them on this, besides sort of cultural diagnostic and understanding where the differences were. We put a plan in place to help the CEO and founder land well in the new business. So he had a buddy, he had a really important position within the European management board. So I think it's about supporting those founders and leaders to actually land really well in a large corporate. So just because they're senior doesn't mean they don't need the right support.
And as for the wider workforce, sometimes I guess a big moment like this where there's a deal is a potential moment where a lot of workers decide to go elsewhere and there's a bit of a challenge around retaining talent. What are the levers that are usually pulled?
I think the really crucial thing that we've seen makes a massive difference in terms of talent retention is that cultural integration or assimilation into the buyer's business, helping people to succeed. And I usually frame it as, how do you create such an amazing experience when you bring people in, that the people who come in would say, I would have joined this organization even if the deal had not happened,
Hmm.
because now I can see how what I do as a scientist or an engineer actually is going to be brought into the bigger world. And I'm going to be making a bigger difference than what I could have done, as a standalone scale up business.
Mm.
So I think that's something that I think big corporates often underestimate. So basically, if you create an amazing experience when people come in and set them up to succeed in your organization, you can reduce attrition by half, which is, I think amazing statistics in terms
Mm.
of value in that business.
You talked about creating amazing experiences for people. How do you make those to encourage people to stay?
So it's really around a framework of how do you help people to say goodbye to yesterday in order to say hello to tomorrow. And you do that by keeping people informed when there's a deal going on, because there's a lot of uncertainty. So you want to reduce uncertainty. You equip them to succeed because they've been successful to date, but they're joining a very different environment. So how do you equip them to succeed in the new organization? You engage them so they're part of actually shaping this future. So you can make it fun and engaging whilst you do that, so it doesn't feel like a big corporate. You're leaving some things and you're joining something else. What does that look like? And then you connect people, because between the buyer side and the target, there's actually a purpose of coming together to actually grow more. And so, and maybe to give an example to bring that to life, this was another Silicon Valley deal that I did. And we actually had the founder and CEO really on board and really excited. So when we switched on day one, where everybody could join this platform where we engage people across the world, he was one of the first to log in and everybody saw it, right? He logged on and he was there telling his people that, you want to learn, you want to grow, you want to be a part of this, and this is massively exciting for us. And it was on that deal that we actually halved the attrition.
And how do you prevent the bureaucracy of a large corporate stifling the innovation and this sort of free spirit nature that you might get in a startup?
Interestingly, I sat with one of the biggest tech companies, their M&A person last week. We were talking about how they deploy different strategies. And they acquired a very, other large scale tech organization. And for that asset, they completely left it alone. And it's grown to be probably about 100 times more valuable than it was when they bought it.
Mm.
And then on other assets, they do completely, tuck them in, and they call them tuck-ins. So I think it's about being super clear about the types of deals that you do and why you're doing them, and then the degree of which you do need to integrate them, rather than that's just how we've always done it, and
Mm.
therefore they have to adopt all of our controls and all of our bureaucracy, if it's going to stifle them. So think about why you're buying it, and then think about therefore what controls you need to feel comfortable as a buyer uh, around that asset.
We're almost out of time, so I'm going to end on the same question that I ask everyone who joins this podcast, which is, if you had one piece of advice to business leaders, perhaps those who are operating in this opposites attract type of deal,
Yeah.
what would it be?
I mean, it's like that with marriage, which is, find the right partner to start with, which is, you can change people around the edges, but fundamentally they are who they are. So I think you can't prenup your way out of a relationship. So the foundation of trust and relationship is really important, and having the business being a part of that shaping of who you would go after, how you would integrate or not integrate them, is really important, because that then drives the, how you best come together as opposites attract. There has to be true love, right? And you shouldn't be waiting to when you see the relationship therapist to say, how do I fix this? This is too late. Start by searching for the right partner that you want to come together with, and that usually starts, you on the right track.
Great. Thank you. Well, before I start to give people relationship advice, I'm going to wrap it up there. Thank you very much, Chau, for joining the podcast.
No worries.
As ever, if you enjoy the podcast, please do like and subscribe on all the major platforms. We'll see you again for the Insight in 15.